Well, our next guest for Getting Up to Speed is a very special one. It's near and dear to my heart as I look at this man as a father figure in my life. And he just recently officially retired from competitively racing sprint cars, and it's Brian Crockett. Brian Crockett is a 10-time Placerville Speedway champion, all-time winningest driver, including in the 410 division at Placerville. We get a word with him talking about what that last race was like, along with his journey as the general manager of the Douglas County Dirt Track in Roseburg, and some other things, including operating a kart track in his backyard back in the day. That's coming up next here on Getting Up to Speed after these messages. Dave's Home Supply specializes in cabinets, flooring, and countertops. Visit their website at daveshomesupply.com to look at products, services, financing, and even a free estimate. Are you looking for bookkeeping, payroll, or income tax services? Then check out the folks at For You Simple Bookkeeping. They are a licensed tax preparer throughout the entire United States. For more information, click on the link in the description. This broadcast is brought to you by Meat Freaks Jerky Club. Get the best jerky the world has to offer straight to your door by visiting meatfreaksjerkyclub.com. Pick your box and plan, tell them where to ship, and receive and enjoy. Log on to meatfreaksjerky.com and use promo code SPEED. Well, joining me, really looking forward to this interview because this is a guy I talk to a lot and have had a lot of fun with through the years. It's Brian Crockett. And Brian, how are you feeling? You took your last ride at Placerville Speedway last Saturday.
Pretty good. Kind of mixed feelings, actually.
Yeah, you rolled out with a car, sort of a tribute car to a scheme that you had previously, correct?
It was kind of a mixture of one of my own and actually one of the Rogers' first cars.
Okay, and you went out there, your first time at Placerville since 1998, I think you told me. And
yep.
Any noticeable changes to the track from when you last raced there to the last night you competed there?
Oh yeah, quite a bit different. Much more bank. Seems a little bit wider, maybe a little bit smaller.
Okay.
Yeah, quite a bit different from the days when I was last there, as I remember. But it's been so long.
Yeah, and this isn't like your first time in a really long time that you've raced. You ran some at Cottage Grove and some sporadic races through the last couple years.
Yeah, a little bit hit and miss.
So I got to tell you, it was a really special, surreal moment. You taking your last lap and everybody just getting up and giving you the standing ovation. I'm sure there was just a ton of emotions going through you at that point in time.
Yeah, it was when I took like an extra cool down lap, and yeah, a lot went through me at that time, because I haven't raced a lot since back in about 96 or so. It was probably 95, 96 was my last full season of racing, and so it's been such a long time since I was there, and all the memories there, and all the times pulling off the track after winning races and close races and all that. Yeah, it was, it's pretty crazy.
Well, and something that was really cool before the pits is just all the people that are regulars at Placerville just gravitating you, sort of like the Beatles are here or Elvis is in the building, kind of, young and old.
But yeah, it's actually pretty cool. Yeah. I mean, I saw a lot of guys that I raced with, and that was one of the reasons that I wanted to come and I wanted to run one more time is, since I've been gone from there, and mostly just in the last maybe 8 or 10 years, is all the drivers that have been, that I raced with that are no longer with us.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just felt like, man, that's going to be me at some point. I want to go take one last run around there, not in a vintage car or anything, just
Sure.
as racing again. And I wanted to kind of do it in honor of all those guys, Mike McCurry, Gene Gillihan, CJ Humphreys, all the guys that have been lost surprisingly over the last years.
And that's a really good point because life is unexpected. There's no guarantee. We know that we're not coming out of this alive, but however, how we go and when we go is what separates us from everybody. But there's people that didn't get that last opportunity to go out on their terms, let's just say, because they got hurt or something catastrophic happened. And
Yeah.
and that's very well put from you.
Yeah. Yeah, that was probably the biggest emotional part of it is for me is just right at that moment, kind of coming to terms with the loss of all of them, because all from other points in time, it's been from a distance. It's never been right there at the racetrack that I knew him at the racetrack that I raced with him, and was good friends with all of them and competitors at the same time. And, it was just like pulling it all together at that moment.
Yes, no, definitely special. And there's still some guys that, it's still cool to see Andy Forsberg. And I heard Andy Forsberg was kind of making fun of you at the pit meeting a little bit, but then there was sort of a bit of an eruption of appreciation for you being there.
Yeah, it was funny. It was kind of all in fun. He gave me a bad time for being late, and then I gave him a bad time for being on the phone. But him being on the phone was making a Facebook post about me being there. So it was all funny. But since I think when Andy first started, I let him use one of my fire suits at the time, and so we've always got along really well and always kind of had a connection. And he came up near the same time as Roger too, and he's great.
Yeah, well, and like other guys that were there in your era and their kids are racing, or involved in racing, Alan Bradway, Greg DeCares, Rod Tyner. It's really cool to see that That's the great thing about racing is it's a soap opera. It's got its drama, it's got its moments. However, at the end of the day, it's all about family. At the end.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, it was one of the first people I ever drove for was Rodney Tyner, and just to have him be there, all just so many, hard to name them all.
Yes, yeah, and you have you on the flip side was busier earlier in the week, Wednesday. Yes, Wednesday. Everything's starting to blend together. The Wednesday part of Speed Week Northwest South, the Douglas County Dirt Track. And for people that don't know, Brian's the general manager of the facility with the Roseburg Racing Promotions. And this was a pavement track for pretty much its entire existence, or at least in the last several decades. It did have 1 year in the mid-90s as a dirt track, but this is like a full-on effort, and that seems to be going pretty well, and really kind of the talk, and not just Oregon, not just the talk of the Northwest, but also the entire West Coast.
Well, that's good to hear. We kind of got off to a rough start. The weather played a big part in our track condition at first, just getting everybody together to reach the same goal. That also, was tough. The last, I think, month or so, we've really got it together, and the track's now what we had all hoped and envisioned it to be.
Yeah, and there's been some great races, some Wing 360 stuff. You guys had the Hers Precision Parts non-wing nationals. NART came through on their fastest 4 days in motorsports. Mod Speed Week was there. You've had some big late model shows. It's been dwarf cars galore there as well, too. It's been a really cool balanced schedule for really a fan of any form of racing, a dirt track racing, could find entertainment there.
Yeah, that was one of the first things that I wanted to do is I think the previous group that ran the track, they ran the same show week after week. And so it gets a little bit monotonous for fans and all. They want to see something different. So putting the schedule together, I wanted to make it diverse enough that there's rarely two events that have all the same cars that night. So spectators can get a variety of all different types and different drivers. And
Well, and that's something that you really brought to Cottage Grove, I think, when you were the general manager there from 2009 to 2011, was it wasn't this typical 360 modified sportsman limited sprints, 4 classes. That's all you kind of was. I'm not, one of the first people, at least to me, that kind of changed that game to we're not running 2 classes of sprints on the same night. We're going to do limiteds, then 360 the next week, and we might have non-wing come in the week after that. Kind of just switching it up, not just to kind of churn so it doesn't get dull for fans' interest, but also for those race teams where they're not, I wouldn't say enslaved, but dedicated to being there the whole entire year. They can have a week off to go to a different racetrack or go camping or do whatever normal people do on a Saturday night.
Yeah, that, and then also just for the drivers that they want to be diverse a little bit and run non-wing and wing, and some of them even begin in limiteds, and as they're working their way up, to give them the opportunity to run most every week, or just to have the learning curve of those drivers to be a little more diverse than just one place, one track. And I think that in the end, it makes the drivers better. And if you look at some of the drivers we've had recently coming out of the West Coast and coming out of, even our area, to be able to run a few different tracks and different types of races, worked well for them.
Yes. Well, I mean, a really good example of that is Kyle Larson, and even to a degree, maybe a lot of people don't pay attention to him, but Logan Seavey, those guys can go on pavement, dirt, and they're just so versatile, and it's super cool to see that carrying over on the big stage.
Yeah, definitely. And even on a more recent schedule, it's pretty cool to see, Tanner Holmes, who was just in limiteds a few years ago, and he's progressed quickly. I had a great time helping him for a year, and to see his growth and him reaching, a part of his potential already right now, that's pretty rewarding too.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun watching him, and just all the good strides that he's made in just a short amount of time with Shark Racing. And Tyler Thompson going from wherever he started Saturday night in Billings at the 12,000 to win Harvey Ostermiller race not that long ago in Montana, to passing Dominic Selzy and Logan Forler, 2 guys that are really good on big tracks and really good in clutch moments to finish runner-up. Yeah.
I mean, same with him. He's, watched him from when I was running Cottage Grove, watch him start in carts, and to see his progression. Some of the guys like that is just it's great to see right here in our area.
Well, popular opinion would be that Cottage Grove Speedway was the first track that you were the general manager of, but we got to turn the clock back a little bit, because you had sort of a recreational go-kart track when you lived in Rio Linda in Sacramento.
Yep, I did. We kind of got, after a few months or so of doing that, we had some neighbors that thought it was getting too big and complained to the county and shut my track down. Well, pretty crazy. Well, but some of the names that we had there was pretty cool too. I think Brian Clausen took probably his first laps in a racing vehicle around that track.
And then and something about Kyle Larson's mom, Janet, with her hair getting, was it in a chain?
Yes. Okay. She was running a cart. Mike, Kyle's dad he was, he was very dedicated to it, and just to watch, that family and to see where Kyle comes from. And if anybody thinks that he got anywhere from, being just in a great money situation and all that, it absolutely wasn't. There's 2 down-to-earth people as I've ever met. And, Mike, he'd build carts and bring them out, and he probably had 4 or 5. And Janet was running one night, and her hair's pretty long, and it got back and got caught in the chain. Yeah, that was pretty crazy. I'm sure she remembers that.
Yeah, yeah, that's one that I'm sure she feels it still to a certain degree.
Yeah.
She thinks about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
About how many cars were you guys pulling for? Because it was middle of the week, right?
Yeah, I think it was either Wednesday or Thursday nights. We'd have about probably maybe 8 to 10 carts, but the carts were all owned by Mike and myself, and a couple other people bring carts out. But then we would have probably 20 to 30 people show up, and so we'd all take turns in the, it's kind of like going to your local go-kart track and getting in line and getting on.
Sure.
But we'd all line up and have heat races, and you had to transfer through to get, and the best 8 got in the main event.
Yeah, yeah, and then the redraw would be which cart you want to pick. So.
Yep, exactly.
And then I think you told me this. The neighbors, they kind of put the kibosh on it, but your daughter, and I think it was the neighbors girl too, you guys started operating a concession stand, and so then it was found out that there was being money exchange or something like that.
Yeah, kind of. It was more so, everybody was there, and it was in summer and it was hot, so they'd go to the store and get some sodas in an ice chest and just kind of sell them to recoup the money. They weren't actually, doing it to make money or anything, but that's what it was.
Paying their way through
That was
college.
kind of what, yeah, that was
yeah.
That was what we got accused of. So
Boy, yeah.
that, and probably the dust level was a little high. But
yeah, multi-million-dollar operation going on.
Yeah.
But in the wintertime, you guys all kind of stayed together as well with slot car racing. I think you told me too.
Yes. Yeah. Mike, Kyle's dad again, had built, by hand, built a go-kart, slot car track, built all the little slot cars, and they were all, so intricate and painted just like a lot of the cars. He had the Bailey brothers, Jimmy Sills car, and just all the cars that ran back then. And then several of us, I'm sure, probably Kyle's first racing laps were probably on slot car tracks there.
Yeah.
But again, Clausen's, they'd come out there, and just several of the racing community, and pretty cool times.
That's super cool. It's super cool because Sacramento, I consider is sort of the, no disrespect to the Central Valley, but I guess for Northern California, so I guess this is accurate, it's the hub. And you have all those teams that are based there even to this day, but back in the day, you had West Capital, West Cap, and some neighboring tracks that are still there and some that aren't there anymore.
Yeah, we had also Roseville was dirt at that time before they finally paved it. And then when Roger first started racing, I think we figured we had, 6 or 7 tracks that were within 2.5 hours that we could go race on a Friday or Saturday. So at that time, when he first began too, that gave him the opportunity. I think his first year we probably ran 70 races or so, where, that's pretty hard to do. A little easier in California, but still, there's not a lot of Friday tracks anymore. And
yeah, during COVID, I was talking to this about Andy Forsberg in my interview way back when. Something that was cool about COVID is there was, there's X amount of tracks, but they couldn't really schedule on top of each other because they were going for the back gate because there was no front gate, and then pay-per-view money too. And so it got to a point where there were some weekends, not every weekend, but some weekends they were racing 4 times a week, which was insane, which was really cool for a spectator. I don't know how much fun it was for some of the drivers that they were having 4 rough nights, but that was a super cool deal for them. Yeah,
I thought so. And that kind of played into our hands at the Douglas County Dirt Track too, of not wanting to run. There's 7 tracks in Oregon. Every single one of them runs on Saturday night. So we wanted to run on Friday. We wanted to give the drivers from all the neighboring tracks a chance to run 2 days a week if they chose. We were kind of hoping that would play into the hands of IMCA, that, some guys in the West Coast here could get many more races in than they could just being able to run once a week. And that still may be in the future, but we have to prove ourselves to IMCA as a group, and just that we're trying to do our best to work with all of our neighboring tracks.
Yes. Yeah, and that's the crazy thing when I go to the Midwest is they're like, "Oh, I've heard about all those places. That's super cool. What day does that track race? Saturday? Well, about that place Saturday? How do you guys get car count when you run all on Saturday?" And it's just the way the dominoes fall and everything. There is a little bit of distance for them. It's not a situation, like in Iowa where they have to race on a different day or they're going to be fighting, for five, they're just going to end up with 5 cars at each place.
Yeah, I mean, I had hoped that our car counts would maybe be a little bit better. We've been hit and miss. Most of our sprint car stuff's been really good. We haven't caught on, and I think it's because until we get sanctioned by IMCA, that'll help boost, I think, our mod and late model counts or modified and sport mod counts, that sort of thing. That right now, everybody's kind of saving their car to run their point races, so that's probably hurt a little, but we'll keep at it.
Yeah, and going back to the proximity and everything with California, I remember Steph and I were dating, and it was one Saturday, and she just said, where do you want to go? What race do you want to go see? I'm like, well, what are you talking about? Like, Petaluma's right here. Well, we don't have to go to Petaluma. We can go to Antioch. We can go to Marysville. We can go to Placerville. We can go to the Central Valley if you want. And that was just something that really threw me off because it was all within decent driving time where, where we live in the Willamette Valley, it's not far distance. It's just options are limited.
Yeah, they are. It's getting a little more diverse, but it had always been, Cottage Grove was a sprint car track and Willamette was a late model track. And, those were basically the 2 biggest in the valley. Medford's been a little bit of everything, but it's just far enough away that they don't really seem to share the cars. Like in California, if you're in Sacramento, you can go to Placerville in 45 minutes, Marysville in 45 minutes, Chico maybe an hour and a half, Petaluma an hour and a half, Antioch, just all those places are so centrally located to a place that doesn't have a track of their own. And that's kind of what makes it different. Up here, everybody that races at a certain track is generally a little bit closer to it.
Yeah, and I was West Capitol. You had raced there before, right? In the very early part of your career, correct?
Yes, I raced there for a few years before it closed. It closed in 1980, I believe, was the last race there.
And that was the original home of Dirt Cup, Gold Cup, Race of Champions. And there was some really fast guys that raced there frequently and even would come in.
Oh, yeah. That was the first place I saw Jan Opperman, Roger Rager, who was, big time Midwest sprint car driver who'd even run Indy. He was, I think, famous for the school bus engine when he ran Indy. And Sammy Swindell was there, and Steve Kinzer. All the big names came, and it was before it was a traveling group. They came because the race was a high-paying race. It was, a little bit different now. It was true outlaw racing. I mean, Doug Wolfgang came. If any, the car counts would be incredible just because they put up money and everybody wanted to come get a piece of it.
Well, and I was reading in Jack Hewitt's book. Jack Hewitt was a guy that went there, and Rick Ferkel. I think Rick Ferkel was kind of the paver for him. For when I say him, Jack Hewitt, to come out west to go to West Capitol and another racetrack that's unfortunately not with us, Ascot in Gardena, LA area. Yep.
I remember, I think it was 79. All those guys came out, Opperman, Ferkel, and kind of a guy came from nowhere, from Idaho, Terry Crocher, just had an incredible stretch of races and beat all those guys.
Well, and then also some of the local guys that were from that area, like Leroy Van Connick, Jimmy Boyd, Jimmy Sills. I mean, man, those had to have been on a weekly program, some stacked main events.
Oh yeah, incredible. When I was growing up, before I raced myself, Gary Patterson, he was he was my favorite. And yeah, the guys you mentioned, and him, Jimmy Gordon before his tragic accident.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he was destined to great things too. It kind of is the same pattern now as so many drivers with so much success that end up in World of Outlaws and all that
Mm-hmm.
have come from our area, or the West Coast,
Yeah.
California.
Like Knoxville Nationals, 8 out of the top 10 from California, and 3 of the top 5 from, or West Coast based, I should say, and then 3 of the top 5. It's just something's in the water. I mean, it's just incredible, and that's not to diss Ohio, the Midwest, the Outlaws themselves, or Pennsylvania by any means, but there's just this strong, good production of performances and races for West Coast based drivers. Because I say West Coast because look at what Devin Borden's doing in Pennsylvania. JJ Hickle's rolling good now in Ohio and the Midwest, and your son Roger Crockett defending Power Eye Boss Outlaws Sprint Series champion. I mean, wherever they go, it seems like they're not just somewhere in the pack; they're generally up front.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, between Kinzer and Schatz, all the championships they won, everything in between is Jason Myers from California, Brad Sweet from California. Pretty impressive.
Yeah, and I mean, just the amount of talent you just watch every week and not just the Outlaws, but sprint car as a whole, as a landscape. You know this, but not a lot of the viewers do. Like, I was sort of an IMCA guy for the last few years, and then I've gotten back into it, and so it's thrown me off. Like, holy smokes, I never realized how much driver carousel there is, but when in fact this is sort of a rare year. And then like the World of Outlaws points championship, it's ultra close. The All Stars Owners Championship is ultra close. The NARC series has been wonderful to watch. IRA's been super killer to watch with some great talent there. And Knoxville was exceptional for their weekly program. Like, I feel like as a whole, sprint car racing in the United States and Canada, where they race them, is in a really good place. It seems to be in a very good spot.
Yeah, definitely so. Yeah, there's been a lot of good quality races. Anybody that has Flow, Dirt Vision, and all our locals channels and all with Fast 4 and Dirt Oval TV, gosh, you're treated to some very good racing every weekend, and you want to stay home and watch it.
Yeah. Well, how cool is it that it's not cool when it rains out, but you're able to do that. You're able to basically binge watch. Like, typically people stay home and on Sundays and they watch NFL from noon to midnight or however long they do. But for us diehard crazy sprint car fans, if you're not doing anything, you can watch race after race after race, which 10 years ago, it would have been a pipe dream, or you would have called somebody crazy.
Yeah, definitely. And then again, with high limits and them running the midweek races, that's just, if you're a racer yourself and you are always participating and you don't get to see as many in the weekends, there's your chance. And those, again, have been, you're getting to see the best of the best at all those races too.
Yes. Yeah. And going back to something you said, Jimmy Gordon, you were at the race that he unfortunately lost his life at, correct? That was a Cal Expo on the Sacramento Mile?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. And I think you and I talked about this. You did go there in a race car only once, right? Was it an exhibition or just for a hot lap session?
No, I actually never did. When it switched to Cal Expo, I was supposed to drive a late model there. They had late models along with the Dirt Champ cars one year, and it fell through right at the end. So I never actually, no mile track experience for me.
Okay. But you watching races there, was it similar to like DeCoin or Springfield, or was there something a little bit, I wouldn't say better, a little bit more unique about the Sacramento Mile versus the ones that are in the Midwest?
Well, the one unique thing about it is absolutely 100% a horse track.
Mm-hmm.
Mile, dead flat, and they raced on it once a year at the most. So it was, it was a little bit different. And then again, maybe those other tracks I'd get to see on occasion on Wide World of Sports or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But again, without the viewership that we have today, you didn't really get to hear about those places, but
Sure.
never really get to see them.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, Fred Ranner Jr. and I, we talk about it all the time. This is how important the internet has been, or my race pass, even to a greater degree. You didn't know who won a big race somewhere in XYZ Speedway at ABC USA unless you knew somebody that was there, or you knew who was racing there, or you got Speed Sport News or Racing Wheels in the mail.
Yeah, exactly. And now, like, the way home from the races, wherever we're traveling to, by the time we get home, we know who won at probably 10 different places.
Sure.
Or maybe even already knew from skipping around on my race pass or race monitor. It's incredible what the technology allows you to do for knowledge of it all now.
Yeah.
And when you have your guys and your local guys that you can follow, where they're going to be, and you can, check up on them. It's pretty cool.
Well, one thing that I've learned about traveling with Brian is that you fill up your storage of stories that you want to talk, or topics you want to talk about, because we'll go on some long drives, and one of them that you and I did a handful of times was checker flag flies at Trophy Cup in Thunderbolt in Tulare, California, and it's 10 hours approximately to get back home, and we went from midnight to rolling into our neck of the woods about 10. I don't know how we did it, 10 a.m. There was a couple of times where we struggled, but a lot of it was going, I remember, throw up that race. Where did he start? What did he time in at?
Yeah. I wonder now how we did that too. As I get older, it gets a little bit more difficult when I have my stops along the way, but thankful for In-N-Out for staying up until 1:30 at least. So at least we get something to eat and a boost of energy for the drive home.
Well, he got me subscribed to the Hostess frosted chocolate donuts to keep me awake. I am not on the Starbucks double shot little mini espressos though. So
well, that's the second half of the key. It takes them both.
Sure. I'm only firing with half the cylinders. So.
Yeah, you're firing on 4.
Yeah. Well, going back to promoting, so coming into Douglas County Dirt Track, it's kind of sort of your really first time back since right around 2011 as a general manager of a racetrack. What have you noticed compared to when you had Cottage Grove, which seems like in a different era, in a good way, not in a bad way, pre-COVID, we'll just say it, versus like a post-COVID world? Are drivers and fans and crew members, are people a little bit different to work with? I mean, I know that you're in a completely different racetrack, different county, different city. They may do things a little bit different, but is there some things where it's like, wow, this was a lot easier when I did it in 2011, or man, I thought this would be a lot harder, and it's a lot more simpler?
It's hard to compare the two. I think the difference being is Cottage Grove was established.
Mm-hmm.
So all I had to do there was try and make it continue to be successful. It had been successful. It always has been. At the Douglas County Dirt Track was something completely different. We started from scratch, from ground up. We had a lot of resistance from some of the group that was there before, and I'm sure probably some of the drivers
mm-hmm.
that, were not happy that it changed from asphalt to dirt. So we had to just really start from the ground up, and I think we're heading in the right direction. We still got a lot of building to do. That's probably the biggest difference, though. It has been good. We've got support from, a lot of the other promoters. Everybody's been pretty cooperative as far as trying to schedule races that fit together. We've tried to do the same. We scheduled a race the night before the Marvin Smith race, which is basically the biggest sprint car race in Oregon. And I think that worked out well. It helped us, and it also helped Cottage Grove, as I know a few guys that we talked with and called that were, willing to come up to run that one extra day. So I think it helped out both, and hopefully we can continue down that path.
Yeah. Well, and I know some of the crowds have been really good. A notable thing, and I don't know if I told you this, so this may be a new information to you, but on Independence Day, you guys had your big fireworks spectacular, had a late model show, and I remember something that will go with me to the very end is there were so many people there that they were parking literally, and I kid you not, literally on the on-ramp of I-5. And in fact, I think somebody was parked on the shoulder of I-5. I don't know how they didn't get their car destroyed, but like that's how crazy, and I say that in a good way, that's how dedicated some of these fans are in Roseburg. They'll do whatever it takes to find a parking spot, even if it's on the freeway.
Well, that's kind of twofold there. It was unique the way that we did it. Rather than just charging our normal amount for the race that night, we thought that maybe it'd be better if we charged for parking and then a lesser amount to get in.
Oh,
and
okay.
a lot of people didn't realize. They thought, oh, you're charging for parking to get in. Mm-hmm. But if 4 people came in a car and they paid $10 to park, and then they all came in the races and paid $10 to get in instead of 15, they just saved some money. And, a lot of people didn't realize it, and not sure how it worked out, but I think a lot of that was people avoiding the $10 parking fee.
Well, I do know that a Douglas County sheriff came up into the announcing tower and said, hey, we don't know if this person's at the races. We can only assume, but they are parked in somebody's driveway, and they need to move. So I don't know what the end of that story was, if it was a happy ending or a sad ending for them. But as far as I could tell, the people that were on and for folks that don't know where Douglas County dirt track it is, you could throw a baseball and probably bounce it off of a trailer of a freight truck and catch it. That's how close it is to Interstate 5. It's right there, which is great because it advertises itself pretty much.
Yeah, it's definitely. I know Cottage Grove is close too, but we're a little bit closer. Yeah, it is right on the freeway, easy on, easy off. I've tried to use that as a sales pitch to World of Outlaws to get a race, and haven't been successful yet, but we won't give up. We'll keep working on them.
Sure. Yeah, and that was something I was going to ask. 2023, well, a big event coming up. It'll be the 29th and 30th Western States Finals. That's back. That was a big event at Cottage Grove, kind of a last hurrah for 360 racing in the Northwest. That should be a really good show.
Yeah, I hope so. It's tail end to where all the tracks are done with all their point races and all that. And I think we scheduled it a week before Fall Nationals, and that's maybe a couple weeks before Trophy Cup. So gives everybody that last chance to finish out the year with a burst.
And then, so that'll cap the season off pretty much. But 2024, and you don't have to reveal any details, that's totally fine. Is there anything you're going to guys change, or just going to kind of go with status quo what you did this year as far as the schedule is concerned?
We will go to promoters meetings, take a look at what was successful for us and what wasn't, and try and work from that. Definitely. I think the area down there, every time we have sprint cars, everybody wants to see sprint cars. So we'd like to have a few more races, a couple bigger races. And if we can bring any big traveling groups or whatever in, we'll definitely do that.
Okay. And of course, IMCA sanctioning, that's a goal. I know for you guys.
Yeah. Definitely.
Oh gosh, I was going to ask something else and I completely lost my thought. And also, Brian, in between, well, kind of simultaneously at one point of running Cottage Grove, ISCS was the owner and operator of that for several years as a 360 series. You brought it back in 2018 and then operated that till right around, I think, before COVID hit, 2019. So when I say you've been away from the promoting game, you only in the sense of a general manager, but you've been involved in that role as a series director and working with promoters. So you haven't been completely away from it.
Yeah, I no matter what I do, can't seem to get too far from it one way or the other.
Yeah, yeah.
As many different sides of it. Till last year taking a year off to see the crew chief side of it, and been pretty wild.
Well, and as being a full-time crew chief last year for Tanner Holmes and that racing operation, I mean, we're all still going in circles. They still have a nose wing and a top wing, and the technology's changed. But what is your takeaway from the environment? I mean, we talked about how close and competitive it is, but on boots on the ground in the pits, how competitive is it between the crew chiefs, not just the drivers? I mean, that can be pretty, not cutthroat, but that can be pretty. You got crew chiefs that are star-studded with a lot of accolades that they're competitive and they want to beat everybody too.
Yeah, exactly. It's no different than being a driver. They're just as competitive. It was pretty crazy the other night. I was helping Steven Snotter and also Johnny Burke on the same night, and both of their cars were heading in opposite directions, and so it was just kind of crazy going complete different directions with each of them to get them to where they were their best. And they both ran really good. This was at Medford. They both ran really well in the main, but you can't just take two cars, set them up exactly the same and expect that the drivers will drive the same. It's a lot of fine tuning.
Yeah. Well, and something that I realized that, Trophy Cup, it's a big event. There's a lot of cars, a lot of good talent, but in the cockpits, but turning the wrenches, I think you and I had this conversation, like Trophy Cup, you have Dominic Scelzi, who's his crew chief, Jimmy Carr, Rico Abreu, Ricky Werner, Paul Silva with Tyler Courtney, Drew Warner with the Mesita, with the Tarleton cars, Dustin Golubic, who I think's underrated, with Shane Golubic, and they eventually won. You with Tanner Holmes, and Jimmy Jones with Ryan Timms. It's like, holy cow, it's not talked about enough. I think it's getting better and better with broadcasts of pointing out who's working for who, but you start to realize that some of these guys are wizards, and you yourself included, when it comes to setting up these cars and making their driver go faster.
Yeah, it's kind of fun, after a while to look and see. Now you get to see so many different guys doing this and the successes they are, and how they have to gel with a driver. With all the driver changing in the Midwest this year, you see some teams that are running really well, and then they flip-flop drivers, and all of a sudden they both start to struggle. And it just goes to show that, even the best driver and the best crew chief, they still have to gel together, and sometimes it takes a couple weeks.
Well, and I had a conversation with this about this topic with Jimmy Carr for a while, and I look at a crew chief as sort of like a wrestling coach. You can prep it all week. You can get your guy pumped up as much as possible. You send him off the track. It's like, this is all in your hands. I've given you all the tools for success, I hope anyways. And you're not going to talk to your driver unless there's an open red to get him psyched up or get him calmed down or get a read of like where you can communicate with them. It's just kind of all in God's hands after that.
Yeah, that was kind of fun with helping Tanner last year. Is we went along, and pretty soon we just got to a point where I'd say, okay, I can't make it perfect. I'm not going to make it perfect, but I'm going to make it where you can make the difference. And so, when we both were on that same page and had that understanding, it was the success came right along with it.
Well, because there's two school of thoughts when you think of, or at least to me anyways, so maybe there's just some casual fans listening, but I always look at it, there's two ways. It's the crew chief. You hear the stories of the crew chief that's like, I'm setting up for you, you need to adjust to my style. Or the other school of thought is the driver with all the input and says, I need you to do this, kind of, make me comfortable sort of deal. And I guess there's an option 3 where there's like that, and it can happen. It's not impossible, where you have a little balance of both, where here, I'm going to give this. Okay, well, I'm afraid it's going to do this. Well, let me do this instead, kind of deal.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, there's some guys out there. Carl Kinzer in his prime. He was just able to see on his own what it took, and if there was a red flag and he was running third or fourth, look out, because he would always know that how to get that little extra. And I think Paul Silva, of course, is the same way. He's just so in tune with the car that he's able to make those changes. And sometimes, he doesn't have to have the driver's input. He knows himself, and those are the real special ones there.
Yeah, exactly. And Paul Silva was a guy that was with you when Roger was driving for Mike and Janie Doyle's Harley Davidson car. You guys spent a lot of time traveling and had a lot of success as well.
Yeah, he actually, it's funny, going back to Placerville this last week, I needed some wings, so I had Billy Sellers got me some wings, and we talked about that. And Paul actually started with him, and then he came on board with us for a few years, and then I had the opportunity to go back and work with Jimmy Carr and Lasowski, and that just, I mean, he just turned a corner there and was able to take out on his own.
And then Roger was one of the first guys to drive for Silva Motorsports too. I think we were talking about that when they had the throwback scheme for Knoxville for Kyle Larson.
Yeah. When Paul went out on the Outlaw Tour for a couple of years, then he came back and decided to build his own car. And Roger, I think, might have been one of the first ones to drive for him. And I was surprised because I thought, oh yeah, this, he came back and he built a car. Oh well. And I mean, sure. first times out, they were ultra competitive everywhere they went right off. And Paul's just taken off from there, never missed a beat with whoever's in his car.
Well, managing Douglas County Dirt Track for you, you still got your business, BC Motorsports. Now that sort of the driving door has sort of formally shut on a competitive level, is that opening up more time for you and Margaret to do some other things? Or I guess the parts business and the general manager role, that still keeps you pretty occupied, and the phone calls keep streaming in?
Oh yeah, it keeps us busy. And, she likes working at the tracks. She works with us at Douglas County, also works with Heather at Cottage Grove. So it keeps her busy. And then I might not, I mean, even the last few years, I haven't driven my own car a lot. I've had some other drivers. Tyler Thompson's driven it, Kinzer Cox most recently. So I'll still have a car and have some guys drive it. And who knows, maybe somebody up and coming we aren't expecting or something.
Sure. And speaking of opportunities, you had formally put together a deal where you were actually in the running, a finalist for the GM at Knoxville Raceway once upon a time.
Yeah, that was back right after Mr. Capitani retired.
2011-ish, or it would have been for 2012, I think.
Yeah, I think it was 2012. Yeah, I got right down to the wire, and I missed out by a little bit. And looking at it now, probably I don't regret how everything's gone since then. I wouldn't change anything.
Yeah, you're essentially the runner-up. I know you were down to the final three, so
yeah.
But I went back there in August for the first time, and I just thought it was just going to be another racetrack, but there's just something magical, mystical, euphoric about going there, especially during Nationals weekend. It's like being there on a busy day at Disneyland. Like, the buzz is in the air. Everyone's having a good time, even if you're not running the best. I mean, maybe, I guess that I shouldn't speak for those people, but that's it. Everyone is there to have a good time, racing, non-racing people.
Yeah, just being there, it is something special. And any time that you take a town of 7,500 and all of a sudden it swells up to 20 to 25,000 for the week, something special is going on there.
But that being said, it's also cool to just see this, and just being in the industry as long as I have, just see the serious and know what the stakes are on the line, and seeing everyone in kill mode, kind of. You know, Donnie Schatz not really talking to people because he's focused on, he's got a job to do. And, you know, seeing the crew guys, normally they're kind of happy-go-lucky, but everybody's super serious. And I like seeing that because it's like being in a locker room essentially before the Super Bowl or the World Series or a big UFC fight of, we're here to have a good time after the races, you know, once work's done. But when you see these guys in work mode, it's intense.
Yeah, it's absolutely business first. And I think that no matter what other tracks maybe come up and pay a little more here or there or whatever, Knoxville's always going to be the crown jewel. It's going to be the one.
Yeah, and it just, the location of it, it's really, it's super central, and the history of it as well. It's been around for over 60 years. It may not be the longest event, you know, running event continuously. It may not be the biggest paying event now, but the prestige is, I think it's the greatest, but that's just me.
Definitely. I agree 100%.
Well, Brian, and also getting into your racing side of things, we've talked about the last ride, and for you, what was your introduction to racing, and then tell us about those early days, getting into those first couple of cars.
Okay. My first introduction was when I was probably 12, 13, somewhere in there. My dad actually pitted for a guy, Chuck Webb, that ran West Capitol, and Roseville was dirt at the time, and some other tracks around the area. And so shortly thereafter, my older brother, Ed, he decided to go in partners with a guy, get a car. And by that time, I was probably 15, 16, right around there. So I decided to go help them and pit for them and all that. And I did that for a few years until one night they gave me a chance to go pack the track and then hot lap. And that was all it took. I needed to get a car of my own. So sold my street vehicle, went and bought a car with no motor in it. So I had a race car with no motor and no street car to drive.
Oh no.
So, yeah. And then it turns out, like 3 weeks later, this is, I believe, 1977. It was like a drought year in California. And so they decide I think it was like mid-November almost, we're going to have one more race at West Capitol for the season. So I had to go scare up a motor and scare up a truck and a trailer to get to the track, and off I went on my first racing adventure.
Wow. And how did you do? What did you take from that first race? Was it a struggle, or what? Obviously, how'd you keep coming back?
Yeah, it was actually not bad. There was, I'd have to say there was probably around 80 cars or so. There was, at that time, they would take the first 20 to the A, the next 20 to the B, next 20 to the C, so on. And I qualified 42nd and started in the started in the front row of the C and finished second, but there was no transfer. So my night was over, but okay. I was able to hang in there and finish where I started, and off to the next year. I had over the winter to try and scare up a vehicle and a tow rig, and I didn't do any of that.
Okay.
So my first year, it would be every Saturday, it would be trying to find a truck, one buddy's truck and somebody else's trailer to get to the racetrack. I did get a car to drive so I could go to work during the week, though.
Sure. So you weren't in total scramble mode, just occasionally.
Just on Saturdays.
Yeah. And then you ran your own stuff, but then there was a time where you started to drive for people. What were some of the first people you drove for, and how did that kind of come about?
I believe that probably I was running my own car, and I think this was probably post West Capitol. West Capitol I ran for a couple years before it closed down, and always ran my own car there. And then I started running at Placerville, and I believe I had some kind of motor issue or something. So this other competitor that I raced with, Ken Maddox was his name. He let me drive for him, and he actually had something unique. He had a 289 Ford motor in his. That time we were limited modifieds. They were called. They were like the in between hardtop and super modifieds with a smaller motor. So I ran it a few times, and then one night, I don't recall the occasion why, but I got the opportunity to drive for Rodney Tyner, and that went pretty well. And so then I carried on with that for a couple of years.
I think your greatest story that you ever told me about driving for RT for Rod Tyner was you were it was in the day where you're a winning machine, and somebody, I don't know what you were, now you'll have to clarify this on the details, but you were running up front, you were chasing down first place, or you were leading late in the race. Somebody finished you off, and you were like hopping mad. You were just 110 degrees boiling, and then you get to the pits, and Tyner's already got you kind of cross paths, and like he's like, putting his hands together. Don't worry, we already took care of it for you. So.
Yep, that's exactly. I rushed back to the pits, got out of the car, and they're on their way back. They'd already gone taking care of business.
Well, and what was the circumstances of it? You were leading, and it wasn't a guy you were racing for the win. It was a car you were trying to lap, right?
I think it actually was a guy that the last lap he dove down at Placerville. It didn't used to have a big berm like it has now. It has a berm now where you can't do this, but
sure.
It had basically no berm, and he just cut right into the infield, and he sprayed like it just shot loose dirt all out in front of me. And he kept going, and it just made me come to a stop. I lost traction and started to spin, and I got off the gas trying to stop from spinning out, and it just killed the motor. And there I sat in the middle of the track, dead in the water. That's why it took me a couple minutes to get back to the pits. I needed a push truck.
And it was divine intervention because your car owner got a hold of the guy before you did. So.
I can't. If I remember right, the guy drove his car onto the trailer, ramped down, and his car owner was already in the truck. They knew there was trouble brewing, and they went, dragging sparks of flying down to the Rayleigh's parking lot, and they finished loading up there to get out of town.
You didn't stick around to get the trophy of the interview.
Nope.
Okay. So from Tyner, Tyner wasn't the only guy you drove for. There was a couple others.
I drove for Gerdell Kumar, the Kumar's Corner 1K for a few years too.
Okay, and how was that set? That I think you've told me some stories about that. It always starts with, one time I was driving for Kumar, is how the story goes.
Yeah, he actually, I'm pretty certain that's where I won my first track championship at Placerville, and I believe it was like 1984.
Okay.
That was like, gosh, I think I got an ulcer that year. We had a close points battle all year long, and it was the first one. It was brutal.
Well, I had you down for 360s at least, and this is just incredible. Oh yeah, no, 410. 1984, 88, 89, 91. And then for 360s, this is just an incredible run. 85, 86, 87, 88, 89, and 91. 10 total championships, six in a 360, 4 and a 410. And, just talking with so many people that have been around Placerville, been around the California scene, when they talk about your numbers, it's like untouchable. It's kind of like one of those deals that'll, like Nolan Ryan with strikeouts, just I say that, knock on wood, and something will happen, but
Yeah.
But
some of them were actually limited modified. That's what I started in kind of, and they were 320 cubic inch. They had like a box steel frame, but other than that, it looked just like a sprint car as they evolved. and those were probably 84 to about 87 or so. I think 88 is when we switched to 360s, and then we had also had 410s with the limiteds, and then with the 360s for a while there at Placerville.
And then you were one of the first guys. Go ahead.
Yeah, what was unique, and this is kind of a strange situation, and be hard to really comprehend this. But back in that time, the way they ran the format at Placerville was they inverted the field from the week before. So if I won and there was 16 cars, I'm starting 16th. And crazy enough, when later years when they changed it, I found that it was way easier to win from 16th than it was from 6th.
Really?
Because when they invert 6 cars and you put the best 6 cars out front, it's tough. And that's why sprint car racing is so difficult today to win races from almost off the front row. It gets harder and harder all the time. Where with the inversion, and there was more disparity in the speed of cars at that point in time than there is now. So to start from 16th, you'd race, your fastest few guys were right there back in the back with you, and all you had to do is get through traffic ahead of them, and coming through traffic, it just made it a lot easier to get to the front than starting everybody fast up front.
And then getting into traffic, and then maybe a yellow happens, and then it never comes again.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there was times when I would get into second, and I'd break free of, a pack of cars. I'd be in second, and I would have no idea. I thought I'd be leading, and then pretty soon I'd be cruising along and come up upon a car. It's like, oh, man, I don't recognize that guy. I don't think I've passed him yet. He's leading the race.
Yeah.
No signboards or anything like that to tell you. I think Placerville may have had a lap counter, but that was about it.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and I was just about to say you were one of the first guys to win a Civil War championship. I think it was called the North and South Shootout or something at the time. But I think C.J. Humphreys won the first one in '91, and then you won the '92 deal, and that was a big deal back then because it kind of unified sort of Central and Northern California.
Yeah, I think it may. I don't remember exactly. I was thinking I may have won the first one before it was officially called the Civil War, but it was. I think we ran Chico, Placerville, and maybe a race or two at Hanford, and that was about it. It was just like a short 4-race series or so.
Mm-hmm.
I don't exactly remember the history of that. It could have been right in those years, though.
But
as it turned out, that was close to the end of my full time.
But getting a chance to go into this in the Central Valley when there was so much racing in the Sacramento area, and seeing some new guys, I'm sure you guys cross-pollinated a little bit at some big shows and everything, but that, going basically into their house was kind of a different deal.
Definitely. In fact, crazy enough, when I went down and ran those races down there at Hanford, Tom Tarleton Sr. was racing, and I raced against him, and Todd Ventura was driving actually the Beef Packers car at very, very beginning of Beef Packers.
Okay.
So it's just kind of a crazy turn that those are a couple guys that I ran against back then who've turned into, terrific car owners, crew chiefs, and all of that as time's gone on.
Sure. And you just touched on it. In the early 90s, you decide to kind of step away from being a full-time driver, and there's no doubt that was a little bit of a, I don't know, like, you're the man at Placerville, and you're winning. What was it, like 14 times you won 2 sprint car features in the same night, between 2 divisions, and then your son Roger comes along. How hard was it for you was it just a natural thing of like, I want to give my kid an opportunity, and I'm just gonna kind of step away and help him go?
Well, it was kind of a crazy set of circumstances. For one, he'd been racing quarter midget since he was about 5, and I wouldn't be able to go with him. So Margaret would take him sometimes, and sometimes her brother. And so he'd get to race on Saturdays when I was racing. And then 92 came around, and it was quite a change. That's the last year that we ran 410s at Placerville. So tail end of the year, they decided we're only going to, scale down just to the 360 class. That consequently was my best year ever in 92. I think I won 26 main events that year. And then I just had a weird string of events happen. Roger started racing at Red Bluff, which that was actually in the winter though. But I just had like kind of a thing go bad with a sponsor situation, and it just took the wind out of me. And the next year I scaled way back, and from that point on, I never had quite the drive that I had. And naturally, right through that period of time, Roger started racing. And so that's how that transition happened. It didn't happen intentionally. It just kind of happened through a series of events.
Well, and then Roger starting racing was a big endeavor because he was so young when he started racing, and kind of at that time, it was sort of taboo to have younger drivers, especially at the age that he was at. And so, so you guys had to search around and go find places that would just sign off and have him race in a sprint car.
Yeah. We went when he was first, I think he was 14. We went back and ran some races in the Midwest. We ran Arkansas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, some tracks back there. At the tail end of, I believe it would be like 94, he might have only been 13. And then the following year, he was allowed to race at Eugene Speedway up here in Oregon. And so he ran there the whole season and actually tied with Jake Maiden's dad, Ty Maiden, for the championship for the season there. They ended up in a tie, and the last race rained out. So they never got to have the showdown.
I remember that, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, that was, so from there, I'd race every once in a while, and it's kind of strange. I remember the exact circumstance of my 25 years ago last race at Placerville. It was, we were running for the Civil War Championship that year, and about mid-season, he started driving some for Roger Henderson. And so we had, like, the week before, we had some miscommunication. The weather was shaky. And so Henderson thought that the races were going to rain out at Petaluma. So he headed for San Jose. And it turned out we raced at Petaluma. And so we took our own car just to be safe because we weren't sure what was going to happen. We're leading points. So Roger ended up running our own car, and the following week was Placerville. And so just to be safe, we took both cars up there, and Roger Henderson showed up. Roger drove for him, and so I drove our car. It had been a few years even then since I'd run there, but that was my last go around there in '98.
Well, and I remember seeing you guys race together, I think maybe just once with my own eyes, and it was 2005. He was racing for Mike and Janie Doyle. And it was Doyle's Harley Davidson night. Maybe it was 2004, somewhere in that era. And they brought it back. They brought a second car, and you were in it.
Yeah, I think I ran a couple times. Once was that night, and once we had gone to Skagit, and we're running Dirt Cup, and I think we hurt 2 motors in 2 nights. And so Roger got a call. We were out of motors and coming home, so Roger got a call to drive a car in Calistoga that night. So we dropped him off at the airport. He flew to San Francisco to go to Calistoga. So Benny and I were on the way coming home, and he goes, let's go run tomorrow night at Cottage Grove. So we came back, got the car ready, and I went out and drove it there.
And I think
that was my first driving experience at Cottage Grove.
And I think I remember that one too, because at the time, I don't think I was the lead play-by-play announcer. I just had like my radio show where I would do qualifying and the trophy dashes, and then the radio station said, okay, we don't want people listening to the whole night or they're not going to go to the races. And I remember going up to you, and I was just like, "You're Brian Crockett," and you're like, "Yeah," and just like smiling. I think Roger's now wife Brandy, but it was Brandy Bounds at the time, and her dad were there, and they're just like giving me this stupid look, and I'm like, anything you want me to put down? No, just like kind of thing. I'm like, okay, that it was an interesting introduction. So,
Yeah.
but actually, no, we had talked before. It was the day Mark Howard got murdered. Pat Desbians took me to Fall Nationals in 2005, and again, Mike and Janie Doyle. I think it was one of the last times Roger drove for them. And we were at the A&A Stepping Stone shop or whatever that Forsberg had, and Pat was, I don't know, Pat was trying to fix his car, and I remember you were telling me, go grab this wrench, go grab that wrench and stuff, and I was just, okay, all right, and I probably gave you the wrong stuff, and I think you ended up doing it yourself, but I think that was the formal first introduction, so, but, yeah. Um, Yeah, and then something special that you did for Roger, right? I think right before you became the GM of Cottage Grove is Roger was sick and needed a kidney donation, and you stepped up to the first division and gave him one.
Yeah, we kind of planned all along. We knew the day would come, and so we planned that his sister was going to donate her kidney. And so we got to the point that all the testing process occurred, and so there was four of us that tested, and I was as good as, if not maybe a little better match. So it was never a question. It was the easiest decision I ever made.
And then for you, that hasn't had any sort of medical complications or anything, like you're healthy as a horse, so to speak.
Yeah, no, it didn't. No, no downside to it at all. Only up.
And oh, I know what the other question was. I was gonna have you. So Roger came up here because he was running so much for the Harley Davidson car for the Doyles, and then you guys eventually followed, and then ended up settling in Cresswell. You and Margaret. How hard of a decision was it for you to kind of leave Rio Linda and the the lives that you guys had established in California, and then basically kind of start fresh in Oregon?
Yeah, it was kind of another weird situation. It was a kind of a little bit of a tough decision. I'd worked at Bailey Brothers for 25 years. And so I left there to come up to work for Doyle's at the Harley shop and as crew chief for Roger. And that only lasted a year, and that all fell apart. And so then Roger moved down to Medford right after that. And so, yeah, we were up here by ourselves, not sure what I was going to do. And that is where BC Motorsports was born.
So this was about what, 2006 or so, right?
Yes, 2006.
Because I remember, and I don't know why I remember this stuff. Like it's crazy the things that I'm able to remember. But I remember, it might have been you, or I can't quite, now that I think of, now I'm boasting about this. I'm under pressure. But there was a flyer for like Triple X chess, because I think you became, Triple X was coming about then. I think you were a dealer for him. And then I just remember Brian Crockett Motorsports, BC Motorsports. All these guys were like, oh yeah, talk to Brian because he can get you one. Like, this is a super cool deal.
Yeah, right. I don't exactly remember how I got involved, but I do know that my first cars I sold were to Jeff Thompson, and they've been very loyal and been a customer of mine. And, we've done a lot of racing things together with Tyler and all that ever since then.
Yeah, it seems like yesterday, but at the same time, you look at the calendar and it was some time ago.
Yep.
Well, and some of the cool things that you've told me, and some listeners may resonate with that were around that time, is sort of the culture of racing back in the days that you raced. Of there were, we talked about that you guys as a group would go slot car racing in the wintertime, and you guys as a group would do the go kart thing at the the Crockett track that was that was under scrutiny by the county, but
Yeah, Rio Linda Raceway.
short-lived Rio Linda Raceway.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
but then, you told me like you were just relaxing in your camper trailer one time, and there was just this ruckus, and it was in the middle of the night, and people were doing like crab walk races at Gold Cup, and just all these things that it's like, wow, people don't do that anymore.
Oh gosh, Gold Cup used to be back in that time. It was crazy. The whole entire off of turn one behind the grandstands, solid tents, just all like tent city.
Hmm.
And I mean, everybody camped there. And I mean, you didn't go too far, and somebody had a little event going, whether it be bike racing or crab racing or
Yeah.
whatever it may be. There was always something racing related going on.
Well, and it was, I mean, like Rio Linda Raceway, it was a real deal. You'd have qualifying, you'd have a dash, a heat, a main event, a B main. I mean, it was strictly to the rules of if we're gonna race like we do on the dirt track.
Yep, exactly.
And you just think about, like, it doesn't happen now these days, and I don't know if everything, if things got too wild and it just hit a point where it got out of control, or we just kind of got tame, or a little bit of both.
A little bit of both. I think there was probably times it probably got a little bit out of hand.
Yeah, yeah. So, but well, it's been great catching up with you, Brian. We'll definitely have to check in with you and see what's in store for 2024 and beyond for the Douglas County Dirt Track. Anybody that you want to thank for your racing career sides of things, or even on the business side of things, before I let you go?
Oh gosh, on the racing side of it, I couldn't even begin to start. So I'm just going to go with, since my memory is now as old as it is, I'll just go with my short term of course, Margaret, my wife, for just supporting everything I've done. And now, the support at the racetrack at Douglas County of Brad, Michael, Steven, and Rachel, who's my right hand that helps me with everything.
That's awesome. Well, and that's something I think that should be touched on when you became the general manager in 2009, the support that you got, because it could easily have been the opposite way around. You weren't from the area, you weren't a native of Lane County, and could have been just a quote unquote Californian here to, take money kind of deal, but that was absolutely not the case. And I feel like that you pushed the boundaries in a good way for Cottage Grove Speedway and brought it to a top-notch facility.
Well, yeah, thank you. And I've always had a good announcer by my side to help take care of all that too.
Well, I know one time I had to step away for like 30, 45 minutes or something, and you filled in my shoes, and you said, I always wanted to be an announcer. So, but hey, it's one of those things, like when you're a GM, you kind of got to do all the jobs sometimes.
Yeah, my 45 minutes is my first, my last, and I absolutely have all the respect for what you do, because it's not as easy as it sounds.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that too. I remember I asked for a raise and you said no, but you told me that I formed my question wrong. You said I should have asked, should I get a raise? And the answer to that would have been yes. I said, do I get a raise? And no, you don't get a raise. So
that is absolutely correct.
it's all about asking the right questions. That's something I've learned from you. And, you've taught me a lot too, because, for people that don't know, I was just the announcer for Cottage Grove. And then 2009, I was just telling this a friend of mine, and I can't remember the timeline of it. I think we were about to have an ASCS national race, and it looked like things were getting, like, just stuff was stacking up and getting behind and everything, as far as like stuff to do. And I just remember coming down, I think I was working at a grocery store, 40 hours a week or something, and I'm like, well, I can do that for you. And I think it was painting seat numbers or painting reserve seats or something crazy like that. And then what that turned into is I'd come down and hang out at Cottage Grove. Heath Shelton was also helping with helping
Yeah.
do track maintenance with Brian, and that was kind of our thing. We'd be all there about noon or whenever we'd show up, and we'd be there till 6 o'clock, and it was really cool. And Brian's taught me a lot of how to market things, and just kind of like with Fred Renner Jr. taught me a lot of things without telling me how to do it. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, definitely caught on well to everything and taking your trade to a new level.
Well, and I think the most important thing is how fairly you treat people, and I try and do that in my life too. As you as a business owner as well as a track operator, you got to make tough calls, but you can't make everybody happy, but you can do your best to just your honesty and your genuine kindness to people. I think is not to say that I was a terrible person before I met you, but but you know what I mean. So
yeah. Just I mean, on the business side, everybody has to be treated the same, and that's all anybody expects.
Yes, and it's hard. It's hard when by the naked eye, yes, you were first place, but by the transponder, it says you were second place. And to do that, and if I reverse that, then that person's going to be unhappy, and I'm just going to have the same situation. It can be a tricky slope sometimes. So
yeah, definitely a challenge.
But yeah, well, I'm glad that you had time. I know you're a busy guy, but we'll maybe have another one of these nice chats later on in the not too distant future.
Yep, sounds great. It's been a pleasure.
Well, that is going to do it for this interview. We hope you enjoyed it. Be sure and hit the like and subscribe button on whatever platform you found this interview at. It really helps us grow the channel, and we greatly appreciate it. In the meantime, we'll be back with more content and interviews in the future. Be sure and have a great evening or a great rest of your day, whatever time you're listening.